They
Sure.
They have an open house on the first Sunday of the month. I will be missing it, but the hangar will be open probably because my friends Jerry and Diane will take care of it.
And it's yeah.
And you can see historic planes and home-built planes, and sometimes there's a car club.
So that would be this Sunday.
Yes.
That's what I figured. So that's a pretty cool Sunday activity. If
It
you're,
is a cool Sunday activity, and
we had another few people that went to not a fun activity, but an important activity. We had a few people that went to the Auschwitz exhibit this past Sunday. We're still trying to find a good weekend, but we also talked about during the summer, maybe doing it during the week. It's not for, young children, obviously, but the kids who went this week with their families that I know were, teenagers. It's definitely appropriate for teens. We brought Shira to Auschwitz when she was 11. That's probably a little young for people to actually be in a camp, but she was very engaged and had a lot of questions and walked around with the guide herself. I mean, she was like literally with the guide. I remember it was about 7 years ago, but she was very engaged in it. But yeah, supposedly, people said you need about 2.5, 3 hours to really take in
that's what the website says.
Yeah. So yeah, that's we're trying to find the slot that works for people to to have that, those hours cut out, and devoted to it, to not to be rushed through. And it's always tough when you go to a museum with people, because people kind of want to explore on their own, and I get it. So yeah, it's important. So we're gonna start reading in a sec. We left off with we read the first few chapters of Jeremiah last week, actually exactly 3 chapters. We had a chance to see a little bit about Isaiah's style, how he writes, what he writes about. We talked about the fact that the first 20 or so chapters are warnings, about 25 chapters. It's not all exactly the same, but there are a few kind of biographical things, not just the very beginning, which really wasn't that much story or narrative, but there is later on in Jeremiah more. And the first 25 chapters are really the warnings. It could be, again, the editor of Jeremiah that we believe was his scribe, Baruch, who was actually mentioned. And we learn about him, which we don't learn about scribes normally. There might have been, again, the method or the desire to have the prophet say his words, and then for the reason of kind of presenting the material, then to get into the story and kind of chronologically kind of explain it to people. But it could be that, again, that was an editorial decision made during even Jeremiah's own lifetime. It was weird once getting into it again. And, I've obviously been reading it and reading some of the commentaries on it lately, but reading it and going through it and like, looking at it and studying it, as we're reading it, I'm reading the Hebrew too, and point out things that are important. I forgot just how stylistically different Jeremiah is from Isaiah and from other prophets that we will read, but also, and it's so obvious in the Hebrew. And again, it's unfortunate we can't study it in the Hebrew, but it's almost to that if you study Jeremiah and then you look at what we call the Deuteronomistic history, the book of Deuteronomy and books that were part of that author or school, you see the similarity in language and you see the word choice. And again, when it's obvious and it's something that I can really point out to you, I already did it a little bit, but I'm going to do it, I'll do it as we go through it. But it's very obvious when you read the book of Deuteronomy in particular, especially the parts of Deuteronomy that are kind of the warning parts of the book of Deuteronomy, how similar it is to Jeremiah, and why it was so obvious to people when they started kind of looking for authorship of the Torah, of the narrative, and then looking at this, that they started to make those connections. So it required first people looking at the Bible and trying to figure out who wrote the Bible. And then it also required people to look at it in the Hebrew, because you will not notice it really in the translation, or if you do, it's a little bit harder, because a translator does their job, and whether the Bible was translated into Latin, whether it was translated into English, whatever language it was translated into, the translator generally translates every book of the Bible, or maybe the translator's job is to translate certain parts of the Bible, but there's going to be a consistency in the translation. There's going to be a translator is going to use certain words in their language for the words that they're encountering in the language that they're translating from. So in the Hebrew, there might be different words used, and the translator will then translate those words with whatever word that they normally use for using that. And it's so hard to convey a style. It's so hard to convey the rhyme and meter of and even the way you and I, two different people speak. Certain people choose certain words to use, and they talk in a certain way. And I'll give you a silly example. My wife, who was raised in England, even though she's been here for a long time, she's been here for over 30 years, she still has English style. There's certain style to her English that is because she was raised in England. And if a translator was translating my wife and I speaking, and they were translating it uniformly, you wouldn't get that. You might get a little bit, but probably not. So that's the problem with studying anything in translation, that it's very hard to convey that style. So when it's obvious and it's really it's really important, it's kind of important, and I want you to see it and to kind of recognize it. It's not, I won't point it out just for the sake of saying, hey, look, that's the same language of Deuteronomy. But when it comes up, then in some cases it's, look, we told you back in Deuteronomy, don't do this, and you did it. Now, if it's written by the same author, that's even easier of a connection to make. But I will tell you that I won't point it out just for the sake of saying, hey, look, it's the same author. But it'll be because there's a reason for it, and there's a lesson in it, and there's something that we can take away from it. So again, I just want to say, when I was going through it last week, and then looking at it again this week, I was like, oh yeah, that's so obviously, that style. So we will post this up right now onto the Facebook, and hopefully not have any issues. We haven't lately. So here we go, everybody. And I'll turn it over to Rosemary. And I'm gonna we're probably going to go a little bit faster today than we did last week, because we were kind of just opening up the book. But if you have something, or if there's something that you want to ask about or stop on, please do so. But I'm going to kind of let Rosemary go through these chapters of, again, Jeremiah's warnings to the people. And as we said last week, the warning kind of ended with this point. Jeremiah is telling people in some cases that these things are inevitable, they're gonna happen, and you just have to deal with it. You can't get out of it anymore. And that's Jeremiah's proximity to the events as they're happening. And again, the destruction of the temple is unfolding during his lifetime. And he's now saying it's not going to happen 10 years from now. There isn't a exit strategy. You're going to have to suck it up. You're going to have to deal with it. And in some cases, yeah, it'll be, we're going to be okay. But there isn't, well, if you turn away and turn back, then it's not going to happen. To some extent, again, and you're going to see right away opening today, it's the punishment's already happening. So let's take a look. This is Jeremiah chapter 4.
If you return, O Israel, declares God, if you return to me, if you remove your abominations from my presence and do not waver, and swear as God lives in sincerity, justice, and righteousness, nations shall bless themselves by you and praise themselves by you. For thus said God to the citizenry of Judah and to Jerusalem, break up the untilled ground and do not sow among thorns. Open your hearts to God. Remove the thickening about your hearts, O citizenry of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, lest my wrath break forth like fire and burn with none to quench it because of your wicked acts.
Yeah. So there is definitely, this warning. And what I just wanted to have you take a look at here, because this is kind of a important line from Jeremiah, and it's one that we also, again, we'll see it in some versions of this. It's a beautiful phrase, open your heart to God. Now, you and I could say, oh yeah, that's nice. It's what people talk about doing. You hear it a lot in Christianity. You hear it a lot in songs and praise and those kind of things. We don't hear it as much in Judaism, maybe, but it is there, and you just read it, and it was there hundreds and hundreds of years before Christianity. But what's also really, really, really remarkable about this kind of idea is that opening your heart to God was not really the way that most people talked about their gods in the ancient world. And I don't mean like, they had faith, they had theologies, they had ways that they worshiped. But the idea that a God wants you to have that type of relationship where you open up your heart, that's not a thing that we see, that we encounter. People were supposed to fear the gods. People were supposed to be grateful to the gods. They were supposed to ask gods for rain. They were supposed to, be fearful of destruction from the gods. But the idea, and obviously God here is going to break forth with fire. So there is a fear, but opening your hearts to God as the mode for having that happen, that's really, really special. And the idea here that it doesn't require necessarily what's described here is not a sacrificial, a relationship with God. It's not if you offer up your sacrifices and you have those good fires for God that, you're going to get, God's happiness and God's going to give you things. But what you have to do is open up your hearts. Now, the other kind of like additional piece of this, which is also very remarkable and very different, is this concept that you have to remove the thickening of your hearts. And I'm sure There's another translation that Mary is sitting on right now with her King James. So what does it say for that line? Open your hearts to God, remove the thickening about your hearts. Don't say remove the thickening. What does it say?
It says, take away the foreskins of your hearts.
Wow.
It's a different word, and that's the word. That's why I find the translation here not literal. It's definitely poetic, and it loses the it loses in translation here. And this is a Jewish translation. One of the important things that you and I know about Judaism, right? Which is one of the basic things that makes Judaism different, and one of the earliest requirements and differences that Judaism had, right, was circumcision. And here, the word circumcise, it jumps out at you if you have the Hebrew word there, and if you have a translation that conveys that. Remove the foreskin of your heart, right? So removing the foreskin allows the heart to be open. That's a really important concept, that it's like your heart has a foreskin and it's preventing you from being close to God. So that's a really powerful idea. It's a very dramatic idea, and it's one that's completely obscured by the translation. And I think that as a Jew reading this, you really have to look at that and go, oh, wow, there's a concept here that we're supposed to have a relationship with God that requires us to really expose ourselves in a very intimate, and in some cases, one would say that circumcision, we don't know for sure because it's done on a little baby, but it can be painful. Removing a foreskin from an adult requires anesthesia and probably should be done by a well-trained medical professional. Yeah, and that's the same word that's used here. So that is why I wanted you to see it, and we'll be moving back. Any other comments or anything on that? So that's a really important translation. I was going to see if we had any of the other translations on the line with us right now, but no. All right, let's keep going.
Proclaim in Judah, announce in Jerusalem, and say, blow the horn in the land, shout aloud and say, assemble and let us go into the fortified cities. Set up a signpost to Zion, take refuge, do not delay, for I bring evil from the north and great disaster. The lion has come up from its thicket, the destroyer of nations has set out, has departed from its place, to make your land a desolation. Your cities shall be ruined without inhabitants.
Yeah. So he's saying, turn back and turn to God and do the right thing. But he's saying it's already happened. It's already gone. The Babylonians are on their way. It's not conditional. It's not like, yeah, but if you do this, then it won't happen. It's on its way. Though it's come out, and it's already happening. It's already headed your way. And so, look, there is a certain kind of like high holiday sense to this, right? Which was below the shofar, turn and repent. A lot of these words, interesting, we don't use this for high holidays. There is a part of Jeremiah that we do use for high holidays. Actually, the chapter 31 we use as the Haftarah for the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Traditionally, there is a part of Jeremiah that we turn to during the high holidays. But this part isn't. And I think to some extent it isn't, because everybody who, well, some things, as we know, sometimes things are taken out of context, but the context of this is so thoroughly, it's already done. Like, you can repent and you can return, but when people are looking at like the next line, it says it's, you know, it's done, you know, it's done, then people people kind of know, and it's almost hard to separate and say, but if you do this, then, you know, and on high holidays, it's, you know, repent because this might be your last year, or repent because, you know, we don't know how much time we have, or repent, the world's depending on you, you know, the whole fate of the world, which means that there's still something that can be done with your repentance. This is kind of, do it, it's because you got to, but it's not going to stop the punishment. We're still in high holidays in the mode of stopping the other foot, you know, for the other shoe from dropping, you know, for the bad stuff. All right, so let's take a look.
For this, put on sackcloth, mourn and wail, for the blazing anger of God has not turned away from us. And in that day, declares God, the mind of the king and the mind of the nobles shall fail. The priests shall be appalled, and the prophets shall stand aghast. And I said, ah, my sovereign God, surely you have deceived this people in Jerusalem, saying, it shall be well with you, yet the sword threatens the very life. At that time it shall be said concerning this people and Jerusalem, the conduct of my poor people is like a searing wind from the bare heights of the desert. It will not serve to winnow or to fan. A full blast from them comes against me. Now I in turn will bring charges against them. Lo, the destroyer ascends like clouds. Its chariots are like a whirlwind. Its horses are swifter than eagles. Woe to us, we are ruined. Wash your heart clean of wickedness, O Jerusalem, that you may be rescued. How long will you harbor within you your evil designs? Hark, one proclaims from Dan and announces calamity from Mount Ephraim. Tell the nations, here they are, announce concerning Jerusalem. Watchers are coming from a distant land. They raise their voices against the towns of Judah. Like guards of fields, they surround her on every side, for she has rebelled against me, declares God.
Yeah. So you're seeing this all play out, and it's everybody's going to know about it. And again, it's inescapable. You can be rescued, you can be saved, but you're being saved from destruction. You're not being saved from the destruction. You're from the destruction happening at all. You just hopefully will be rescued, right? And that's the best you can hope for at this stage. I mean, nobody wants to hear this. And guess what? They don't want to hear it from Jeremiah, because he's saying it's going to happen, and it's, there are probably people who believe it's going to happen, but they don't want to hear it. And you're going to see what happens to Jeremiah. Jeremiah will describe what happens to him when he runs around and tells people this stuff. It does not go well for him.
Your conduct and your acts have brought this upon you. This is your bitter punishment. It pierces your very heart. Oh, my suffering, how I writhe. Oh, the walls of my heart moans within me. I cannot be silent, for I hear the blare of horns, alarms of war. Disaster overtakes disaster, for all the land has been ravaged. Suddenly my tents have been ravaged. In a moment, my tent cloths. How long must I see standards and hear the blare of horns? For my people are stupid. They give me no heed. They are foolish children. They are not intelligent. They are clever at doing wrong, but unable to do right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty harsh thing to hear. And again, you can understand why people don't like hearing it. He's calling them stupid.
Mm.
It's a great line too, because, you know, it says they're stupid. They're like foolish children. Same kinds of things that, you know, you would say to people today. You're acting like a dumb, you know, you say acting like a dumb child, but you know, it's definitely something somebody could say. But what's really funny about this line, and again, there's different ways of translating foolishness, and they're not smart, but then it says they are, however, clever at doing bad things. And that's a really clever way of saying it, which is they're dumb, they're stupid, except when it comes to doing bad stuff. And that they're really, really smart. When it comes to getting into trouble, they're geniuses. And that's a really powerful line, because it's one thing to just say, oh, they're stupid. You know, that's just an insult, and that's just, you know, that's just a knock. But to say they're stupid, they're like kids, except when it comes to doing evil stuff, and that they're geniuses. I just think that's a beautiful line. So it's not what people want to hear, but he does it so well. He does it so eloquently, and he does it so powerfully. And again, it's not just saying, hey, you're stupid. He says that. But when he says you're stupid, and except when it comes to doing bad stuff, then you're a genius. Now look at this next line.
I look at the earth, it is unformed and void, at the skies, and their light is gone.
Yeah. And again, here's an example. And, you know, you're just not going to get this in the English translation, because you and I hear that verse, it is unformed and void. And maybe if we're really, really smart, and we really, really, you know, dig deep, we're going to know what did you say, Sheldon?
Genesis.
Yeah, and you are. Yeah, Genesis. Sheldon is right on the button, man. He's a genius. He knows the words in Hebrew are vehine, tohu vavohu. The phrase tohu vavohu is immediately recognizable to people who are, especially in Israel at the time, especially his audience. And again, you know, the translator of the Bible will probably translate tohu vavohu in the same way. I mean, I'm not going to go back to Genesis right now on this page, but I'll show you. I mean, you could look in your Bibles and see if Genesis chapter 1, you know, Bereshit bara Elohim, you know, et hashamayim v'haaretz, but you know, it says v'haaretz tohu vavohu, right? And so the land was you know, wild and waste, or unformed and void, or you know, whatever the translation is, it should be the same way here. So Mary, your translation's probably got you know, whatever it says at the beginning in King James, right? Which is
Exactly, without form and void.
yeah. And by the way, that's an important translation. I mean, the decision of how do you translate tohu vavohu is a tough one for translators, and people probably, ever since they've been translating the Bible, have looked at that phrase and say, how do we convey that? Which is why, you know, translations that try to pick up not so much just on the literal translation, but the stylistic you know, nuances of the language, will try to come up with something that's poetic for that. So, you know, wild and waste is a translation that was used a couple of years ago in the Everett Fox translation of the Bible. You know, and for people who translated the Bible into other languages, they've tried to keep the tohu vavohu. That's a rhyme. That word rhymes. Tohu vavohu is a rhyming phrase. It's a phrase that demands to some extent, some kind of recognition. And that's a translation, that's a translator's job to some extent. And again, most of the time, most translations people want, they want the literal, they want to know the literal meaning of a word. But you know, you got to kind of also kind of do both. But again, the land is tohu vavohu, and the skies. Now here, it's not like the skies are better, because you know, normally, you know, the skies or the heavens are the dominion of God, and you know, if things are going bad down here, at least up in heaven, in the skies, you know, maybe there's something okay up there you can look to. You know, you look up to the sky, you see a rainbow, you see the skies, and they're you know, they're clear. You know, it gives you an inspiration. The light's gone. So this is a scary situation. It's a world gone mad. And even when you look up to the sky, there's no light, there's no hope. So it's a scary situation. And yeah, tohu vavohu is not a good thing. It's not just, you know, things are unpleasant. It's chaos. Tohu vavohu is chaos. Just so you know, there's actually, again, we don't usually use the words, you know, it was used in Yiddish, tohu vavohu, but people would know that's chaos, right? You're just creating chaos. But the word is also, interestingly, tohu bohu was also used in other languages. Like we don't use it in English as tohu bohu, but in French, it was used as a French phrase. So like people would see that phrase in French, tohu bohu, and they would go, they would get it, they would. So in French, it's actually, it's used. So, yeah, just, kind of keep that in mind. And sometimes people use it in, it's used in comedy. People will, there's a production company called Tohu Bohu. They used to use, I went to the Montreal, the comedy festival that they used to have. I don't know, maybe they've gone, I hope they've gone back to it. And they used to, that was the motto for the comedy show that they would do, the comedy festival that they did at in Montreal. So they would have the signs would say tohu bohu, but it's like it's a serious thing. I was gonna show you if there was a picture of it, but yeah, it's you look at it and you're like, what? It's not really a joke, but it's chaos. But yeah, I guess to some extent it's kind of become not. It's used in more in a comedic way, but it's not funny. All right, because here's what's happening.
I look at the mountains, they are quaking, and all the hills are rocking. I look, no human is left, and all the birds of the sky have fled. I look, the farmland is desert, and all its towns are in ruin because of God, because of God's blazing anger. For thus said God, the whole land shall be desolate, but I will not make an end of it. For this the earth mourns and the skies are dark above, because I have spoken, I have planned, and I will not relent or turn back from it. At the shout of horsemen and bowmen, the whole city flees. They enter the thickets. They clamber up the rocks. The whole city is deserted. Nobody remains there. And you who are doomed to ruin, what do you accomplish by wearing crimson, by decking yourself in jewels of gold, by enlarging your eyes with kohl. You beautify yourself in vain. Lovers despise you. They seek your life.
And by the way, these are, we don't have, well, the Bible is primarily written for and by men. And so you don't oftentimes get descriptions of makeup, and you don't get descriptions of how people beautified themselves. Does chapter 30 have a different translation in for you, Mary?
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, for by enlarging your eyes with kohl. Does it say that?
It says, thou rentest thy face with painting.
Yeah. I think that translation, indicates kind of like what people in the European times kind of would make out of that phrase. It's definitely, your face, on your face, but here it's specifically your eyes, right? So it gives you the understanding that, this is something that people did as kind of eyeshadow or eye makeup. And if we say somebody is enlarging their eyes with kohl, and again, the word isn't kohl here in Hebrew, but you and I know what that means. Did somebody in the King James court have the same appreciation for who puts kohl on their eyes? Who enlarged their eyes that you know of, because you've seen the paintings of it, you've seen the drawings.
Egyptians.
Exactly. Now, the King James people in those days probably weren't as concerned with what Egyptians did, ancient Egyptians did, because culturally it wasn't their concern what the Egyptians did. So this translation actually gives you kind of more of a cultural context of what makeup was like in those days, and specifically enlarging your eyes, which was something that the Egyptians did. Now, this is significant because, again, it gives us an idea, really probably more likely what this is talking about. It's not just putting makeup on. It's not putting eyeshadow on. It's not painting your face, which is, kind of, again, what someone in the King James court would have thought of when they read that, right? Or when they tried to understand that. So, oh yeah, they put on makeup. No, they're doing something in the Egyptian style. They're making their eyes larger, which is one of the things the Egyptians did. And specifically, of course, we know that Jeremiah has a real problem with the Egyptians. So what he's saying here is not only you're putting on makeup and making yourself all fancy when the world is coming to an end, but of course, you're making yourselves look like Egyptians. You're behaving like Egyptians. You've got the wrong cultural context that you're associating with. You're making yourself look like this, which is insane, because they're not reliable. They're the people that are leading you down the wrong path, the Egyptians, by making you think that they're going to save you from the Babylonians. They're going to save you from the people from the east, from the north. You're insane. You've chosen the wrong people to model yourselves after. So this isn't just a matter of makeup and the style, which is interesting, and it gives you a different image when you're thinking about it. But it also tells us a lot about what Jeremiah's issue is, which is don't be like an Egyptian. So yeah, it's about not making yourself up and worried about your makeup when the world is going to hell. That's definitely part of it. But specifically, who you're trying to make yourself sexy for? It's the wrong people. So this is, you're beautifying yourself in vain. Okay.
I hear a voice as of one in travail, anguish as of a woman bearing her first child, the voice of fair Zion, panting, stretching out her hands. Alas for me, I faint before the killers.
Yeah. Now, let's assume that that's the end, or that's a continuation of the idea that we just read here. Now, one could say, well, these are men dressing up with coal and with jewels and things like that. It's possible. But let's also juxtapose these two things, which is a woman getting dressed up to look fancy, which I think it's really about women here, but look at the difference, right? Because you think the time is now like one of a woman getting dressed up to go out on a date. No, this is a woman giving birth. And a woman giving birth, even if you're not a woman who's given birth, generally speaking, a woman in the hospital giving birth, generally they're in the hospital now, but a woman, every time you've seen it in the movies or in real life, if you ever have been in the delivery room, the women aren't decked out in jewelry and makeup, and they really don't care what they look like at that moment. They're generally screaming and they're telling somebody, I want to die, right? They're not looking, it's the exact opposite moment of, oh, look how pretty I am right now, is not what they care about at that moment. So it's the exact opposite. So the juxtaposition of those two lines is meant to be very powerful, which is, hey, this is not the time. This is time of labor pains. And yeah, it's not good. And I think, again, it's comparing, as we've seen in Isaiah as well, Israel, Judah and Jerusalem compared to a woman, right? Bat Zion, or Fair Zion, right? Bat Zion, maiden Zion. All right, so let us look at chapter 5, and let's take a look.
Hey, Rabbi, before you go forward, did
Yeah.
you happen to mention before I joined what Jeremiah's specific beef with the Egyptians was? Did I miss that?
Well, he has a couple. The first is that, and it seems like there were people who felt this way. And again, we get it in Deuteronomy too, the same beef, which is, again, one of the reasons why we think that Jeremiah and his people were responsible for the book of Deuteronomy. Don't go back to Egypt, right? Don't go back to the place where we left as slaves, right? So that's a historic beef, right? There's also the practical beef, which is that they are not reliable allies. They are allies who cannot, according to Jeremiah, and he was right. I mean, we know that from hindsight, but they are not reliable. They will not be able to back you up when the Babylonians come through. They're not going to help us. And by the time the Babylonians make their way through, they're not going to be able to protect themselves from the Babylonians. So they're not going to be able to protect you, and they're not going to be able to protect themselves either. So don't rely on them from a practical standpoint, from a historic standpoint. And there's another beef that we have here, which is, which goes back to Josiah, who was one of the heroes for Jeremiah and for his father and for his friends. Because remember, well, if we assume that Jeremiah's father, Hilkiah, is the same priest, and we believe he is, there's every reason to believe he's the same Hilkiah who's the one who is working for Josiah, the one who gives them the book of Deuteronomy or the Torah, and when they're doing the work and they find the book. If that's the same Hilkiah, this is a guy who, and Jeremiah and this family, they not only don't like the Egyptians, they connect the Egyptians with all of this bad stuff, but at the time of King Josiah, the Egyptians fought against Josiah. Josiah had allied himself with the Eastern folks, the Babylonians and the Assyrians, those Eastern armies, against the Egyptians, and the Egyptians went to war against Josiah and killed him. So the Egyptians killed his hero. So he has a lot of beef with the Egyptians. He has a lot of reason not to like them. And so again, there's the historic, they're the place that enslaved us. There's the practical, which is do not rely on these people. And there's this other beef that's much more recent, which is they killed Josiah, these Egyptians, they're these people, this group, even if it wasn't the same people. He's saying they're responsible for killing one of our greatest kings. So they did not like him. They did not like them. They didn't like the Egyptians, whoever the Pharaoh was at that moment that he's saying this. And it probably doesn't matter who the Pharaoh was, because he didn't like any of them, Jeremiah. So he does not like them. And they're part of the problem, which is the irony of what happens to Jeremiah when he gets brought against his will to Egypt. So that's the absolute worst thing that could happen to somebody who hates the Egyptians, is having to live there. So that's what happened to Jeremiah. We'll get to that. So let's take a look.
Thank you.
But no, that's an important thing to have people be reminded of. He does not like Egyptian culture. He does not like the Egyptian people, and he has no room for them. So let's take a look at chapter 5.
Roam the streets of Jerusalem, search its squares, look about and take note. You will not find anyone engaged. There is no one who acts justly, who seeks integrity, that I should pardon her. Even when they say, as God lives, they are sure to be swearing falsely. O Eternal One, your eyes look for integrity. You have struck them, but they sense no pain. You have consumed them, but they would accept no discipline. They made their faces harder than rock. They refused to turn back.
Yeah. So you can see, same kinds of stuff. But I do want to point out, even when they say God lives, Chai Adonai, right? Chai Adonai, you know those words. Chai is life, right? Adonai. Yud Hey Vav Hey is Lord, right? It really should be as the Lord lives, but that's why they use the God all capped. But the weird thing is they did O Eternal One for Adonai here, but that's not my point. My point I want to show you is, what did people say in those days, right? What did they say when they talked about God? They said, as God lives. It's kind of a interesting phrase. Of course, God lives, right? But it was this idea that our God is a living God. What, we kind of take it for granted today, but that was a phrase that people said, as God lives, which again, you're not really supposed to swear in Judaism on God, right? It's not a thing we're supposed to do, but it shows that people, it shows that it shows that people said it. It also shows, again, that phrase, Chai Adonai. But it also kind of reminds us that, in a weird way, in the ancient world, people very much believed that gods could be killed. Gods could die. Gods could die. Gods could be gods could, their reign could come to an end, and they could be destroyed by other gods. And as we know from the Egyptian mythology and the Egyptian gods, some of the other gods that we're also kind of aware of now as we've read the Near Eastern literature, as we've uncovered archaeological, texts from the Canaanites and some of the other people that lived in our vicinity. One of the things that some of these people also believed in were gods, and we know from the Egyptians, gods that died and were resurrected, gods that came back to life. And so the idea that, again, that we have in Christianity, that a god could die and then be resurrected, Osiris myths were very, very important to the Egyptians. The Tammuz myths and legends about the god of Tammuz, the god of that area. It's the name of our month. Tammuz is named after that god of Tom, of that region of the Canaanites. So that's another god that died and was resurrected. And sometimes these stories were played out in the heavens by the seasons and by the fact that, the God was annually resurrected. So it has been noted that some of this is the basis for some of the Easter celebrations and Easter traditions that kind of were reinterpreted and reimagined by the church when they didn't fully do away with every element of paganism or the culture of the lands that they came in contact with. And so they kept some of these traditions. They kept some of these spring resurrection traditions in the back of people's minds. They didn't really ever go away. And so the Easter holiday became also a time of thinking about the rebirth of nature, but through the lens of the Jesus story. So interesting to think about. As God lives, we really don't think about it that much from the Jewish perspective or the way we've read texts over time, but now we do. We're a lot more aware of what other people do and what they say, and especially what they wrote about in the ancient world. All right, so people are not turning back, right?
Then I thought, these are just poor folk. They act foolishly, for they do not know the way of God, the rules of their God. So I will go to the wealthy and speak with them. Surely they know the way of God, the rules of their God. But they as well had broken the yoke, had snapped the bonds.
Now, who would have thought that the wealthy? Now, I by the way, that's not necessarily a great translation. It's not. I mean, it could be part of the word here, but what's the translation that you have, Mary, in verse 5? I will go to the
Great men.
Yeah, not necessarily wealth. The Gedolim are, and we still use the word kind of in Hebrew today, right? A Gedol is not necessarily a wealthy person. It's a respected person. Respected, not always the same. I don't know. Stolmans, what does your translation say for God? I guarantee you it doesn't say wealthy, but anything there, Stolman? You guys?
Sorry. You know what? We are traveling.
Oh yeah, you're in the car. That's right. That's right.
We're at the airport. Sorry.
You don't have the Bible in front of
No.
you. Yeah, it's not going to be the wealthy. And I think that there's, the translator definitely wanted to convey this kind of idea that the wealthy should know better, which is weird because, why necessarily? But, again, he's saying that when he's really, of course, by saying it's the great or the recognized people, is that the people who should have known better, the people who are the leaders of the community, should know better. The Gedolim are the leaders. And that's the way I would translate it. I went to the leaders to speak with them, right? And that would include the priests and the teachers and the king, the politicians. Those people should have known better. So that's where, again, the wealthy kind of conveys this kind of like, well, there's a little bit of a class warfare here. It might be, but it's not by economics. So, I mean, sometimes they are. Sometimes the wealthy are also the leaders. Sure. Capitalist system, that's especially going to be true, but not necessarily. And this wasn't just a capitalist system in ancient Israel. There were other power structures. There were other hierarchies, right? There was priests, there was prophets, there were kings, there were people who again were probably the equivalent of political leaders back then, elders. All right.
Therefore, the lion of the forest strikes them down. The wolf of the desert ravages them. A leopard lies in wait by their towns. Whoever leaves them will be torn.
I'm in class.
Sorry.
Whoever leaves them will be torn in pieces, for their transgressions are many, their rebellious acts unnumbered. Why should I forgive you? Your children have forsaken me and sworn by no gods. When I fed them their fill, they committed adultery and went trooping to the prostitute's house.
And we read about prostitution before. He definitely uses Jeremiah, that is a frequent analogy that he makes us like we're prostitutes. In some cases we are prostitutes, and in other cases we are going to prostitutes. All right.
They were well-fed, lusty stallions, each neighing at another's wife. Shall I not punish such deeds, says God? Shall I not bring retribution on a nation such as this?
Yeah. So, sometimes it's not clear whether he's talking about prostitution or whether he's talking about going after other gods, which for him is like going after somebody else sexually, right? So sometimes it's just plain old, you committed adultery and you were doing that. In other cases, he's really saying it's about what you're doing with God. Okay. So you're sometimes it's not clear, and sometimes again, maybe it's both. But he does use those analogies. You see it a lot. We'll probably see it every week. We'll see adultery rear its lusty head. Anyways, each name, I mean, it's a wonderful, again, it's not just what he says, it's how he says it, and he compares them to horses, right? And it's a great image. It's a powerful image, not a great image, it's a powerful image.
Go up among her vines and destroy, lop off her trailing branches, for they are not of God, but do not make an end. For the house of Israel and the house of Judah have betrayed me, declares God. They have been false to God and said, it is not so. No trouble shall come upon us. We shall not see sword or famine. The prophets shall prove mere wind, for the word is not in them. Thus and thus shall be done to them. Assuredly, thus said God, the God of hosts, because they said that, I am putting my words into your mouth as fire, and this people shall be firewood, which it will consume.
Yeah. And again, the prophets that were telling you it's going to be okay are wrong. They are literally speaking wind, just full of hot air. It's the words we use today.
Lo, I am bringing against you, O house of Israel, a nation from afar, declares God. It is an enduring nation. It is an ancient nation, a nation whose language you do not know. You will not understand what they say.
Yeah. And that's kind of an interesting phrase, right? Which is, they're an ancient nation, so you have to respect that to some extent, right? You have to appreciate that. But this idea that you have no idea what they're talking about when they're doing their stuff, you won't even understand it because you're not familiar with their ways. You're not familiar with their language. You don't speak it and you don't understand it. You won't know what's happening. You won't know what hits you. So partly it's the fact you really don't understand the language, but there's also this idea that it's just going to be you're just going to be messed up. You're going to be messed up mentally by what happens.
Their quivers are like a yawning grave. They are all mighty warriors. They will devour your harvest and food. They will devour your sons and daughters. They will devour your flocks and herds. They will devour your vines and fig trees. They will batter down with the sword the fortified towns on which you rely.
Yeah, and this is all stuff that Deuteronomy says is going to happen. All these things is exactly the same language that we have in Deuteronomy.
But even in those days, declares God, I will not make an end of you. And when they ask, because of what did the eternal our God do all these things? You shall answer them, because you forsook me and served alien gods on your own land, you will have to serve foreigners in a land not your own.
Yeah, so there you go. You're worshiping other gods in your land, right? Foreign gods, and so you'll be foreigners in their land, in another land, right? You'll be you'll be foreigners. That's the justice there. And again, it's a very similar type of phrase that you get from Deuteronomy. And when they ask, right, they will come and ask you. When your children ask you, right? That's the famous phrase that we use from Passover that's in the book of Deuteronomy. When your children come to you and say, what is the meaning of this, right? Or, well, you shall tell your children on that day. This is the kind of language we get in Deuteronomy. V'haya ki tomru. This is the same, and oftentimes it says on that day, right? Ayom, on that day. So it didn't say it didn't say Yom here, but it said in the previous line, even in those days, right? So, but again, he's talking about, prophecies. He's saying, what will happen. But yeah, you get those kind of phrases to some extent. I mean, you're going to see that obviously in a prophecy. It'll happen in those days, but even this phrase is kind of reminiscent of Deuteronomy.
Proclaim this to the house of Jacob and announce it in Judah. Hear this, O foolish people devoid of intelligence, that have eyes but can't see, that have ears but can't hear. Should you not revere me, says God? Should you not tremble before me, who set the sand as a boundary to the sea, as a limit for all time, not to be transgressed? Though its waves toss, they cannot prevail. Though they roar, they cannot pass it. Yet this people has a wayward and defiant heart. They have turned aside and gone their way. They have not said to themselves, let us revere the eternal our God, who gives the rain, the early and late rain in season, who keeps for our benefit the weeks appointed for harvest.
Yep. Well, there you go. There's a very clear idea of one of the most important things that God does, right? Which is gives us rain in the right time, in the right season. Again, one of the things that we see here that we saw at the beginning, your heart, your lev, right? Again, the heart, and it's not just the heart, it's the heart, mind, the lev. It's a tough word to translate. Of course, we also see that in Deuteronomy, bechol levavcha, right? In all your heart, right? So the word lev is used a lot in Deuteronomy, a lot in Jeremiah. And here your heart is sorer umoreh, wayward and defiant, wayward and defiant. The heart is wayward and defiant, right? So it's the heart and mind, the heart/mind, whatever. The lev. That phrase, sorer moreh, is the same phrase that we have for in Deuteronomy for a son, a ben sorer moreh. So it's a phrase. It's used, maybe it was used by other people, but we know it specifically that phrase, which is translated the same way, Deuteronomy. When we see the translations, usually it'll have wayward and defiant, whatever the phrase you use for sorer moreh, that's the wayward and defiant child. And again, according to the halacha, according to the law, based in Deuteronomy from Kiteitzei, the wayward and defiant son he's killed. It's killed, is executed. Now the Talmud says that never happened. Never was a child executed. It never actually happened. No child ever had to suffer the death penalty, but it was considered a law on the books. And again, the Bible says specifically what you have to do when you have a child who's wayward and defiant. The parents have to come forward and say this child is wayward and defiant. So, so the idea is that it could happen, and it is on the books. But yeah, that phrase also sticks out in our head as a Deuteronomy phrase. Yep.
It is your iniquities that have diverted these things, your sins that have withheld the bounty from you. For among my people are found evildoers who lurk like fowlers lying in wait. They set up a trap to catch other people. As a cage is full of birds, so their houses are full of guile. That is why they have grown so wealthy.
Yeah, and that shows you, by the way, what people did in those days too. It gives a little clarity on how people did those kinds of things back then, which was catching birds. They would set traps. They would catch birds. Sometimes they would catch the birds to eat them. Sure, that was definitely something that you could do if it was at least by the biblical standards, a kosher bird to eat. But another thing that would, and again, there are a lot of restrictions on kosher birds because the birds that are enumerated, as we know, in the book of Deuteronomy and also in Leviticus, they are birds that are not birds of prey. They're not birds that eat other birds. So you can't have there, and because it's one of those things where you have to kind of see what the bird eats, that the Bible gives us a list of birds. It tells us the birds we can eat and the ones that we can't. So a lot of the ones that maybe people would have come into contact with the most, those weren't necessarily kosher ones. Doves and those kinds of birds they're kosher, but ravens and crows and all kinds of different vultures, they're not. And people definitely came into contact with them. And so if they caught them, they weren't supposed to eat them. But you can see what people did. They would lie in wait, they would capture birds and set up traps. And now they're saying it's like that's what people are doing in a
Mark,
evil way. Yeah.
can you eat the eggs of birds that are not kosher?
It's a good question, right? Because you'd say, well, if it's an unfertilized egg, then it should be able to be kosher. No, people will not use the products of these birds for anything that they would consume. Interestingly, there are birds that are not kosher that you are allowed to use the feathers of, or at least people have used the feathers of in a kosher, in a Jewish halachic context. So the feathers were not an issue. How do we know? Because ostrich feathers used to be there was a big market in ostrich feathers, really big, seriously. As a matter of fact, it was a really big product that was imported, it was exported from South Africa. And so ostrich feathers were, not only were they used, the ostrich feather market in South Africa was controlled by Jews. I know because I went there a few years ago, and we went to this town in the middle of nowhere in South Africa, and there's still a synagogue in this ostrich, this ostrich farming area, where that's what they did for 200 years. They've been selling ostrich feathers. There's not a huge market for it anymore, but yeah, but eating them is different. And when I was there and I saw this synagogue, it just drove me to learn a little bit about the ostrich feather, the Orthodox control, or the Jewish. It was Orthodox, but it was a Jewish controlled business. And they still have a rabbi that comes occasionally to that town and does services there. But the synagogue, we just happened to drive right past it. And we had lunch next door. I was like, I said, Tracy, we got to check this out, and learned about the ostrich feather market. But yeah, I mean, people used non-kosher animals probably in the ancient world for feathers, or maybe they even used them for for hunting. If people did falconry and those kind of things. But can't eat them. You can't eat their eggs. You're not supposed to be eating them. It's interesting too, because my theory, and it's not my theory, a lot of people have this theory, that the issue was not eating carnivorous animals was based on, again, not eating animals that could have eaten another animal that wasn't healthy, right? And if you ate an animal that fed on a carcass of a dead animal that was unhealthy, that those bacteria and those parasites would go into that animal, and then you'd consume it when you ate the next animal. So the more you were relying on vegetarian products and animals that themselves were vegetarian, the better the chance was, I think, would have been that you would have been healthy. So that's why, and again, we know now that, you're not going to get sick from eating an egg from a non-kosher animal that ate other animals, but it's not good to be in that environment where there's disease and parasites. So again, would the parasites have been passed to the egg? No, but they didn't know that. And it's just not a good, it's not a good thing. If you're not consuming food from that animal, don't consume their products, including their eggs. I'm trying to think what other products you would have from those animals, but yeah.
It's like pigskin.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think if there's another product besides eggs that an animal could give that they didn't die when they gave it.
Oh,
I guess there's those people that they drink coffee from the poop of those, whatever they are, lemurs or whatever they are. And
ew.
oh yeah, there's some real expensive coffee that comes from
Lemur poop.
lemur poop or lemur, whatever, some kind of creature. So I was going to say there are examples of it in our world where the animal it's not an egg. And I don't know that people did that regularly, but there are oils, and generally speaking, the things come out of the animal once they die, but there are animals that are raised not to be eaten, but to be, juiced or musked out of, and so, yeah, you look at it and you're like, yeah, I guess people did that with other kinds of animals, and obviously skins and furs and those kind of things that people used were not necessarily from kosher varmints, right? They didn't have to be edible for the skin to be used, right? As a matter of fact, the strimals and the fancy hats that people had in Europe that are still part of the Haredi clothes, right? Those are mink and those kind of varmints. That's what they used for the sable and the mink. That's what they used in the and those are not kosher animals to eat, but they use the fur. Still use the fur. Yeah. So those are not kosher. Those minks. We don't, and most people didn't eat them anyways. They just used the fur, unfortunately. All right. So that's what they did with these birds. Well, that's yeah. Go on. Thanks.
They have become fat and sleek. They pass beyond the bounds of wickedness, and they prosper. They will not judge the case of the orphan, nor give a hearing to the plea of the needy. Shall I not punish such deeds, says God? Shall I not bring retribution on a nation such as this? An appalling, horrible thing has happened in the land. The prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests rule accordingly, and my people like it so. But what will you do at the end of it?
Well, it's probably a somewhat rhetorical question, right? Which is, you're going to be doomed. But yeah, it's the prophets that he's dealing with, which again is not something that we really got from Isaiah, which is, hey, all these other prophets are screwing up and they are making you oblivious to the disaster that's actually looming out there. So Jeremiah is not just preaching to the people, he's also telling the people that everybody else that you're listening to is wrong and is messing it up. So he's trying to get people to listen to God and not listen to those people. So not only is he competing for the attention of the people to get them to listen to the right message, but they're hearing another message. And that's one of the things that we see in Jeremiah it's so painful for him, is that he's not just speaking to people who don't want to hear it. They're hearing something else. And that's the problem that he's facing. All right, so let's move into this next chapter, into chapter 6, unless we have somebody else. Okay. Who has a question? All right.
Flee for refuge, O people of Benjamin, out of the midst of Jerusalem. Blow the horn in Tekoa. Set up a signal at Beth Hakerem, for evil is appearing from the north and great disaster.
Yeah, so just point out these areas in Benjamin and the areas around Jerusalem, these are areas that were in the outskirts of Jerusalem. Beit HaKerem is now part of Jerusalem, but Tekoa is a settlement. It's a Jewish outpost surrounded by Palestinian territory. And why is Tekoa important for people? Because it's mentioned in Jeremiah, and it's a place where the horn would be heard. So to have a biblical community come back to life in Tekoa was very important for the people that live in that area. So that's why these areas, and I just point that out from a modern perspective and a modern lesson. Yeah, it's the fact that you can go to these places now, and it was very important for in the modern nation of Israel for these places to come back to life, and for them to be part of Jerusalem and part of Jewish part of our land. So in this case, again, it's because that's where the outer rim around Jerusalem was where people would first see the disaster coming, right? But today, it's part of the kind of the protection of Jerusalem, these cities being, surrounded by the Jewish people today. It's very important for for the settlers and for the people that look at this as part of the control of Israel today. It's not so much, again, just what happens in the city of Jerusalem, but what happens on the outskirts too. And again, Israel calls it creating facts on the ground, creating communities where there will be people and say, hey, look, we're not leaving, we're not moving. So Tekoa is one of those places today. That's kind of sometimes in the news.
Fair Zion, the lovely and delicate, I will destroy. Against her come shepherds with their flocks. They pitch tents all around her. Each grazes the sheep under his care. Prepare for battle against her. Up, we will attack at noon. Alas for us, for day is declining. The shadows of evening grow long. Up, let us attack by night and wreck her fortresses. For thus said God of hosts, hew down her trees and raise a siege mound against Jerusalem. She is the city destined for punishment. Only fraud is found in her midst. As a well flows with water, so she flows with wickedness. Lawlessness and rapine are heard in her. Before me constantly are sickness and wounds.
Yep. And there we have that phrase, Hamas, which means lawlessness, violence. Rapine. Yeah. Yep. That is the phrase that we have right there. Lawlessness. And again, it's flowing like water.
Accept rebuke, O Jerusalem, lest I come to loathe you, lest I make you a desolation, an uninhabited land. Thus said God of hosts, let them glean over and over as a vine, the remnant of Israel. Pass your hand again, like a vintager over its branches. To whom shall I speak? Give warning that they may hear. Their ears are blocked and they cannot listen. See, the word of God has become for them an object of scorn. They will have none of it. But I am filled with the wrath of God. I cannot hold it in. Pour it on the infant in the street and on the company of youths gathered together. Yes, men and women alike shall be captured. elders and those of advanced years. Their houses shall pass to others, fields and wives as well, for I will stretch out my arm against the inhabitants of the country, declares God.
That's an interesting phrase, your fields and your wives. And that's the word, sadot benashim. I mean, however you're going to translate that, there's an understanding that it's your land and it's your people. Yeah.
For from the smallest to the greatest, they are all greedy for gain. Priest and prophet alike, they all act falsely. They offer healing offhand for the wounds of my people, saying, all is well, when nothing is well. They have acted shamefully. They have done abhorrent things, yet they do not feel shame, and they cannot be made to blush. Assuredly, they shall fall among the falling. They shall stumble at the time when I punish them, said God.
Yeah. And again, this is the problem, is they are being lulled into a false sense of security. And they're saying, all is well, all is well. Shalom, shalom. That's the phrase. Shalom, shalom. Ve'ein shalom.
Thus said God, stand by the roads and consider, inquire about ancient paths. Which is the road to happiness? Travel it and find tranquility for yourselves. But they said, we will not. And I raised out lookouts for you. Hearken to the sound of the horn. But they said, we will not. Hear well, O nations, and know, O community, what is in store for them. Hear, O earth, I am going to bring disaster upon this people, the outcome of their own schemes, for they would not hearken to my words, and they rejected my instruction.
And again, that is a phrase that we have in Deuteronomy too. Shema, right? Hear, over and over again. Shimu, hear. I can't hear.
What need have I of frankincense that comes from Sheba, or fragrant cane from a distant land? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable, and your sacrifices are not pleasing to me. Assuredly, thus said God, I shall put before this people stumbling blocks over which they shall stumble. Parents and children alike, neighbor and friend shall perish. Thus said God, see, a people comes from the northland. A great nation is roused from the remotest parts of the earth. They grasp the bow and javelin. They are cruel. They show no mercy. The sound of them is like the roaring sea. They ride upon horses, accoutered like a man for battle against you, O fair Zion.
Yeah, and you can see that's a scary image. These people are coming at you, and they are like the sea, the sound of them coming at you.
We have heard the report of them. Our hands fail. Pain seizes us. Agony, like a woman in childbirth. Do not go out into the country. Do not walk the roads, for the sword of the enemy is there, terror on every side. My poor people, put on sackcloth and strew dust on yourselves. Mourn as for an only child. Wail bitterly, for suddenly the destroyer is coming upon us. I have made you an assayer of my people, a refiner. You are to note and assay their ways. They are copper and iron. They are all stubbornly defiant. They deal basely. All of them act corruptly.
Yeah. Not Jeremiah is here. The analogies that are used here are interesting too, because we saw people fouling with their catching birds. We've seen prostitution used as an analogy. This one's an interesting one because this is a metallurgy analogy. People who know a little bit or understood about metals, and we're not they are strong like copper and iron, but what we know about these things are they are not base metals. And by base, I mean not like, base in this sense of being bad, but base as pure elements, right? These are all strong, but they're strong because they are corrupted a little bit, right? They're, I won't say they're corrupted, but they're alloys, right? They're combinations. Makes them strong, but they're not, and they're not in some sense, here they are used as examples of, like, if you're talking about like what would be a good metal, it's pure gold, right? Gold is pure and it's also worth more, right? But these other things are kind of like, baser metals. And again, maybe somewhat, in some cases, alloys are not pure. It's how they get stronger in a way, by mixing them. But anyways, that's the metallurgy that we're reading about here.
The bellows puff, the lead is consumed by fire, yet the smelter smelts to no purpose. The dross is not separated out. They are called rejected silver, for God has rejected them.
Which tells us that they're probably, and again, this word kesef in Hebrew is the word we use for money today, but kesef also is the word for silver. Kesef is the Hebrew word for silver, because it was the more common coin would be silver. We still use that word in English. Well, we don't, but if you read Shakespeare, you would, for a few pieces of silver, right? For a little bit of money, right? And so, yeah, these images are ones of metal, and you could see that in the ancient world, sometimes the stuff came out wasn't good. They had the right ingredients, however they did it. Sometimes the stuff came out bad. The metal didn't work. The process didn't work. So here, the lead is used in the smelting process and doesn't work. So that is the, for people who understood metals and would register for them. All right, now we're going to finish with this today, with chapter 7, probably. Maybe we'll read a little bit more, but chapter 7 actually now gives us a little bit of an image and a background and a little bit of narrative about Jeremiah, because we've been listening to Jeremiah's words today. Now we're going to see him for a second. Here's what it says.
The word that came to Jeremiah from God. Stand at the gate of the house of God, and there proclaim this word. Hear the word of God, all you of Judah, who enter these gates to worship God.
Wait, did Jeremiah, where's he doing this? He's doing it at the temple. He's not just going out on the street and screaming at people on the city squares. He's at the gate of the temple, which means he's doing this so everyone can hear. He's doing it publicly and in one of the most important places and one of the most visible places and one of the most powerful places. He's doing it at the temple. That's huge. He's not writing a note. He's not telling somebody and say, hey, by the way, tell these people this. And again, he's not going into just the square of the city. He went into the temple, the entrance of the temple, and said this. It means everyone's going to pay attention. It means the other prophets are going to hear it because he went into the prime area, which he probably wasn't supposed to do anyways. Even though his family are from the family of priests, he may not have had permission to do this. I mean, we have to almost assume he didn't have permission. And even if he did have permission, he is now speaking out against the priests and the prophets who are in charge. So he's completely putting his life at risk by doing this. So this is a substantial image right here. It's not just like everybody did this. They didn't do this. He's doing something that is dangerous. It's very powerful. It's very courageous. And he's doing it because God told him to. He didn't just decide, I want to do this because I want to get a lot of people to pay attention to me. God told him to do it, which means God's putting him in that jeopardy. It's like Moses going into the court of Pharaoh. A lot of similarities to that. Right? So this is a very it's a very powerful and scary situation. Here's what he's supposed to say.
Thus said God of hosts, the God of Israel, mend your ways and your actions, and I will let you dwell in this place. Don't put your trust in illusions and say, the temple of God, the temple of God, the temple of God are these buildings. No, if you really mend your ways and your actions, if you execute justice between one party and another, if you do not oppress the stranger, the orphan, and the widow, if you do not shed the blood of the innocent in this place, if you do not follow other gods to your own hurt, then only will I let you dwell in this place, in the land that I gave to your ancestors for all time.
Yeah. So beautiful. You know this, right? You're supposed to be in this land. I gave it to your ancestors, but it's only going to happen if you do the right thing, right? Which is the words that we see over and over and over again in Deuteronomy. Don't oppress the stranger, the orphan, and the widow, right? And so you got to do the right thing. You got to behave ethically. And he says right here, it's not what goes on in the building that's important. It's what you do every day in your life, which the priests don't want to. They don't want you to say that, Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you're from the priest. You know better, right? You could imagine the priest pulling him aside and saying, even if you believe the message, you don't want him to say, hey, don't worry about what's going on at the temple.
Yes, he's standing in front of the temple and saying all the sacrifice and stuff is
Don't matter. It's not going to help you. Yeah. And so it's a very powerful image, and it's very dangerous. And he's putting himself, or God put him in a situation where he's risking his life doing this. And that is indeed what happens. His life is in jeopardy by doing this. So he is going to the place and telling him. He's not standing outside, down the street and saying, don't go to the temple. He's standing in the temple saying, what are you doing here? That's a very powerful situation. Of course, we have this story of Jesus coming to the temple, in the Christian Bible, but really Jeremiah is doing this 700 years or 600 years before, and he's doing it in a way that is almost 650 years before. But the reality is he is not only doing it as a prophet, he's doing it as a priest, as a priest from a family of priests who are the inside establishment people. I mean, his own family, his own cousins are working there. They are the priests. They are the ones who are the establishment priests too. So.
See, you are relying on illusions that are of no avail. Will you steal and murder and commit adultery and swear falsely and sacrifice to Baal and follow other gods whom you have not experienced, and then come and stand before me in this house that bears my name and say, we are safe to do all these abhorrent things?
It's breaking all the 10 commandments. I mean, it's not all, but it's pretty much, it's going backwards, 7, 8, 9, if you, or 7, 8, oh,
It
wait,
didn't
7, 6.
mention Shabbat.
No, it didn't. Well, he's talking about the fact that it doesn't matter what the religious aspects of your life are. So yeah, it's interesting that he skipped over that. And, he didn't mention, not testifying, not lying.
And no mother and father either.
And it doesn't, again, it's not all of them, but you get this, this ethical behavior. And of course, he also put in about following other gods, right?
Do you consider this house, which bears my name, to be a den of thieves? As for me, I have been watching, declares God. Just go to my place at Shiloh, where I had established my name formerly, and see what I did to it because of the wickedness of my people Israel.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thing that we haven't. We've had allusions to this, and we had some of it even in Isaiah, and we had some of it in the Book of Kings, where people looked at what had happened to the northern kingdom, right? What they had seen the Assyrians do to the northern tribes, to the northern part of Israel, to Israel, the country of Israel that was the northern kingdom, and to say, oh, you don't want to wind up like them, you don't want to wind up like Israel. Now, here specifically, what Jeremiah just said is, we had a holy place in Shiloh. Remember, for those of us who were there for the book of Samuel, that's where Samuel was when he first experienced God. That was the tabernacle. That's where the Mishkan was, where the ark and the holy things were in Shiloh during the time of the priest Eli, who Samuel worked for, the priest. And that was a holy city. It was a holy city, and it's destroyed now. So don't think that a place where God's presence was is safe. Look at what happened to Shiloh. So he's saying, Jerusalem, you're going to wind up like Shiloh. Don't think that because this building's here, you're safe. Because look what happened to Shiloh. Look at the place where the ark was. It's a ghost town now. So don't think that because I was there, that God was there and God's presence was there and it was holy and there was an ark and there was holy things and people prayed and God's presence was there and it was all good. Doesn't protect any place, including Jerusalem now.
And now, because you do all these things, declared God, and though I spoke to you persistently, you would not listen. And though I called to you, you would not respond. Therefore, I will do to the house that bears my name, on which you rely, and to the place that I gave you and your ancestors, just what I did to Shiloh.
Wow.
And I will cast you out of my presence as I cast out your kinsfolk, the whole brood of Ephraim. As for you, do not pray for this people. Do not raise a cry of prayer on their behalf. Do not plead with me, for I will not listen to you. Don't you see what they are doing in the towns of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? The children gather sticks, the fathers build the fire, and the mothers knead dough to make cakes for the Queen of Heaven, and they pour libations to other gods to vex me.
Yeah. Now let's just take a quick look at this one in particular, which seems to be, and again, if you look at the note, it's going to say this is one of the gods that they worship. It's a goddess. We know that. It's a Milkat Hashemayim, to the Queen of Heaven. Now, I had a rabbinic teacher, who wanted to get into my head, or not my head, but all of our heads, right? And he wanted to teach us a lesson. And so he freaked us out a little bit. So he freaked us out so much that I remember it 40 years later, 35 years later, whatever. What am I going to tell you right now? There's a practice here described, and we don't know how early this was being done. We know about it in Jeremiah's day, which is 2,600 years ago. And again, as I told you, it got into my head. Now it will get into your head. You are now going to be freaked by this too. The description of what was just told to us about how people worshiped the Queen of Heaven, that you're not supposed to be worshiping, seems a whole lot like Shabbos. Now, we would never say, hey, we're making food for the Queen of Heaven. But was it possible that baking cakes for the Queen of Heaven was reinterpreted as a way of baking challah? And again, we know we do it because there was bread in the temple, right? There was bread as an offering in the tabernacle. There was lechem panim, there was bread there. But this idea that, the challah was actually baked at home, we say it's because once the temple was destroyed, our house became like a mini altar. But was it possible that there was a cultural, I pointed out to you today that we know, or we're honest about it now, or not we, but Christians are honest about how a lot of the pagan elements of Easter were reinterpreted and kept by the church to, rather than, again, just blow out everything that the pagans did, let's recontextualize it and give it some Christian backing and give it some biblical backing and give it some, a blessing from the church, if you will, so that we can have Easter eggs and we can have, rabbits and things like that are clearly pagan symbols, same as Christmas had. So maybe there was some ancient stuff that we took from the Near East, from our neighbors, and we reinterpreted it and recontextualized it. And that was the point of what this rabbi was teaching us, which was, just like we know that these things happened, 1,500 years ago or 1,700 years ago in Europe, why would this not have also happened in ancient Israel 2,500 years ago or 3,000 years ago? Why would we not think that people have been borrowing and recontextualizing people's holidays for centuries? And it just seems like it makes sense. Again, we're more honest about it now. We talk about how we took Purim from the Persians. We know that, but there are other things that we just don't know. And it's very possible that this Queen of Heaven ritual was a holdover from goddess worship that, we didn't want to give it up. And it was so powerful and it was so loved by people that we gave it a different understanding. We gave it a different tom, which is,
and we kept the feminine by the Sabbath bride.
Yep. And so I'm only telling you this because, you need to know that this is one of the things that we can do now. And I think we can be okay with it. We can be comfortable with it. There's definitely probably a lack of desire to do this in the Orthodox world, or especially the ultra-Orthodox world. But there are people who just see it and go, well, wait, that's way too close to Shabbos to just say, oh, it's a coincidence. So again, we don't pour out libations to the gods, but we do have a Kiddush cup. We do have a fire, in this case, it says the fathers are building fire. It seems like the fire is for the dough, by the way. It seems like the fire is attached to that. But look, we know that gathering sticks on Shabbos was actually a penalized. Someone died for that in the book of Numbers. We talked about that in our Numbers class. That scene of a guy gathering sticks on Shabbat, was actually punished. And again, probably because it had something to do with that. But look, we don't know when the tradition of candles actually became part of our Shabbos rituals, where it became, incumbent on people to light Shabbos. We don't know when that happened. By the time of the Talmud, it was established. But was that because these kinds of traditions had become just so prevalent and so accepted that everybody did it and they all knew that they did it. But where in the Torah does it say you're supposed to light Shabbat candles? It doesn't. And to some extent, it's almost not what you're supposed to do. So the fact that people started doing it, and again, we do have a menorah. We had the whole idea of transferring these things from the temple into your house. We get it. I'm not arguing about it. And we know that. But when the temple was still around, people were doing this. The book of Jeremiah just told us that people were doing it. The book of Numbers tells us that people did it. And we also know that the Babylonians, the context of where the Talmud came from, the environment of the Babylonians where we lived during the Talmudic period, those Zoroastrian people, those Zoroastrian Persians, and we call it Babylonian Talmud, but it was written in Persia. That Talmud time, during those times, the Persian Zoroastrians lit fires for every holiday. They were big into fire. They were big into lighting candles and not candles, but lighting lamps and lighting things. And so the fact that we had these traditions of lighting lights on Shabbos and on holidays and things like that would have been very comfortable for people that live in that environment. Lighting was a very big part of Zoroastrianism. We still have, again, some Zoroastrians that do that. The nickname that they have in Iran, and the nickname, somewhat a pejorative nickname, is that they're fire worshipers. That's what one of the kind of the knocks on them are by the Muslims, was that they worshipped fire. They didn't necessarily worship fire, they didn't worship the fire itself, but it was part of their rituals. And so lighting fires for the holidays was an important act, a ritual for Zoroastrians. So, there you go. Let's finish up.
Is it me they are vexing, says God? It is rather themselves, to their own disgrace. Assuredly, thus said my sovereign God, my wrath and my fury will be poured out upon this place, on human beings and on animals, on the trees of the field and the fruit of the soil. It shall burn, with none to quench it. Thus said God of hosts, the God of Israel, add your burnt offerings to your other sacrifices, and eat the meat. For when I freed your ancestors from the land of Egypt, I did not speak with them or command them concerning burnt offerings or sacrifice. But this is what I commanded them. Do my bidding, that I may be your God, and you may be my people. Walk only in the way that I enjoin upon you, that it may go well with you.
Yeah, now, that's not really true. There is nothing in the Torah about sacrifices. There's a lot in the Torah. What was it in Jeremiah's mind yet that the Torah was filled with these stories and lessons? Maybe not. Why? Because the book of Deuteronomy, and it is in Leviticus, it's pretty much the book of Leviticus is about what the priests are supposed to do and how they're supposed to offer sacrifices. The first 7 chapters are pretty much just that. Nope. Here's the deal. During Jeremiah's time, and again, Jeremiah is a priest. His family for generations, they've been living off of these sacrifices. But what's interesting is that Jeremiah, at least from his standpoint or his vantage point of what the Torah looked like during his time, or what his Deuteronomy was, doesn't talk a lot about sacrifices in it. It is in there. It's not that it's not there, but it's basically offering sacrifices at the holidays. It's not about, the daily sacrifices and those kind of things. It's really in the context of how you celebrate holidays. Just understand, Jeremiah may not have had the Bible as we have it, and the Bible that he had to some extent, or the words that he has of what the people are supposed to do, especially in the book of Deuteronomy, not a lot about sacrifices there. It's not that it's not there, but it's not the focus of it. It's definitely not the focus of it. And so the book of Deuteronomy is 100% focused on leaving Egypt. Over and over and over again, it tells us we left Egypt. we left Egypt. We left Egypt. And Deuteronomy is actually the book that we quote the most, interestingly, when we read the Haggadah. It uses Egypt all of the time. And remember, when your children ask you about Egypt, God freed me from Egypt over and over and over again, because again, maybe the people responsible for Deuteronomy don't like the Egyptians. It's part of that whole, which comes first situation, but it's definitely consistent. But again, I freed your ancestors from the land of Egypt. It's here in Jeremiah, right? And again, the focus is not on the burnt offerings. It's on how you treat people.
Yet they did not listen or give ear. They followed their own counsels, the willfulness of their evil hearts. They have gone backward, not forward, from the days your ancestors left the land of Egypt until today. And though I kept sending all my servants, the prophets, to them daily and persistently, they would not listen to me or give ear. They stiffened their necks. They acted worse than their ancestors. You shall say all these things to them, but they will not listen to you. You shall call to them, but they will not respond to you. Then say to them, this is the nation that would not obey the eternal their God, that would not accept rebuke. Faithfulness has perished, vanished from their mouths. Shear your locks and cast them away. Take up a lament on the heights, for God has spurned and cast off the brood that had provoked such wrath. For the people of Judah have done what displeases me, declares God. They have set up their abominations in the house that is called by my name, and they have defiled it. And they have built the shrines of Tophet in the valley of Ben Hinnom to burn their sons and daughters in fire, which I never commanded, which never came to my mind.
Yep. And so here we get this is it. This is when you want to talk about the lowest depths that these people went to, they practiced child sacrifice. They did what the Canaanites did. They went to the valley of Hinnom, Gay Hinnom, and they sacrificed their sons and their daughters. So this was the worst. God says, I couldn't even imagine this, right? I couldn't even imagine that they would have done this. This is what they did in the land that I gave them. So they've done worse than their ancestors did. Those people just didn't listen. They were always wanting to go back to Egypt. They didn't believe in me, but these people are actually sacrificing their sons and daughters. How do we know? Because Jeremiah said it. He wouldn't have said it unless it happened. And we read about it in the book of Kings. I mean, we heard this. So this is the worst. This is the worst thing you can do. And they're doing it right outside of Jerusalem. The valley of Ben Hinnom is that valley that we come up off of when we go to the Mount of Olives and we turn up. You're going along the wall, the entrance to where we come into the wall, not the Jaffa gate, but the gate that's down by the dung gate and down by that area that is kind of the entrance to the old city that we do when we're not walking through the old city, but coming in through the Jewish quarter. That area, that's the valley of Hinnom. It's Gay Ben Hinnom, the valley of Ben Hinnom. Now we don't know who Ben Hinnom was, right? We don't know how this valley got the name, but we do know this: Gay Hinnom is Gehenna, is hell. That's the word that we use for hell in Judaism. Gay Hinnom became the place that for us was hell. The place where people sacrificed their kids became synonymous. It is the word we use for hell. It's just the worst thing we could think of, which is why today, when we say, the worst place we can think of, to bring it back to what we talked about, is Auschwitz. When people want to say, what's the worst place that you can think of? It's Auschwitz, right? It's synonymous with the Holocaust. It's synonymous with the very worst of what humanity can do to a human. The name Auschwitz became synonymous with that. I mean, I was thinking about this a while ago, the people of Auschwitz, I mean, the Auschwitz in Polish, it's a town. The Germans called it Auschwitz, which is their German version of Auschwitz. But man, if I was from the city of Auschwitz, I'd change the name of the town. I mean, they don't all, they don't say, hey, we live in Auschwitz, but it's a city. I'd rebrand the city. I'd call it, Happy Town or something like that in Polish. I don't know what the right name, but I'd change the name of the town. You can change the name of a city, by the way. I would change the name of that city. I wouldn't like to tell people, where are you from? I'm from Auschwitz. I mean, it's a city. I mean, it's a place. It was a place before there was a camp there. I mean, I feel bad for the people that their city has become synonymous with that. But again, if you lived in the area of Ben Hinnom, your area became known as hell. Where are you from? I'm from Ben Hinnom. I'm from that neighborhood. Really? You're from hell? It's not good. So that's the word we use for hell in Hebrew. So when people say, what's the Hebrew word for hell? It's Gehinnom. And we use the word Gehenna. We say Gay Gehenna in Yiddish, right? Go to hell. Gay Gehenna. That's what it means. Gehenna is hell. All right, we're going to finish up.
Assuredly, a time is coming, declares God, when this people shall no longer speak of Tophet or the valley of Ben Hinnom, but of the valley of slaughter, and they shall bury in Tophet until no room is left. The carcasses of this people shall be food for the birds of the sky and the beasts of the earth, with none to frighten them off.
That's about the worst thing you could do, is be murdered and then have your bodies left to be exposed. There's no place for you to be buried. It's just in that valley where you slaughtered your kids as an offering, that'll be where you're going to be left. Except you're not even going to be buried in that valley. You're going to be left for the vultures. I mean, it's the worst image that you could have. And again, Jeremiah just blew everybody away with that. I mean, you just read that and you go, oh, man, that's a horrible visual. That's a horrible image. Now, can you get out of my head? That's what he did with these people. Is he told them this, and now they have to deal with the fact he got into their heads. He had to. Last words.
And I will silence in the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem the sound of mirth and gladness, the voice of bridegroom and bride, for the whole land shall fall to ruin.
Yep. Now, I had a very busy weekend this last weekend. I've told people, Judith knows, I had 2 weddings. It was wonderful. It's a very good thing to be busy with. But I was really wiped out, and both of these weddings were young people who grew up at our synagogue. Kayla Hertzberg and Joey Van Scoyak both got married this week. Very nice people, traditional Jewish weddings. They married Jewish folks, and it was just an honor to be part of those weddings. We have a tradition of saying the 7 blessings, the Sheva Brachot. Now, interestingly, the 7th blessing, which has also been turned into a song. Kol sason ve'kol simcha, kol chatan ve'kol kala, and that's the words. Ma'ar Yehuda uvechutzot Yerushalayim. In the cities of Judah and the courtyards, the streets of the plazas, if you will, of Jerusalem. And he says, you will not hear that. You will not hear happiness. We also use part of a later chapter of Jeremiah for the blessing that we say. We flip the words. We flip the words so that at a wedding today, we say this. Now, what's so special is that the rabbis said this as encouraged us to do this as the 7 blessings after the temple was destroyed then by the Romans. And so they this is the beauty of what we've done in our tradition. We've recontextualized, we've reformatted those words because it did get destroyed again. And we said the rabbi said, and they told people 2,000 years ago after the city was destroyed by the Romans, and the people, the priests and the people who had said, well, how is this ever going to get rebuilt? They said, listen, we don't know. And the people would say, then we should just give up. There's no reason for us to continue as people anymore. Just stop procreating, stop having. And there were people that said that. And the rabbi said, no, we will remember Jerusalem. We will remember its destruction even on our happiest days. And what's our happiest day? At a wedding. And so I told both couples this weekend this. And both of the kids, both Kayla and Joey with me in particular, because Joey went on my birthright trip, they got to go to Jerusalem. They got to go to Jerusalem and see. And I always say this at a wedding. I say, thank God we live in a time when Jerusalem is being rebuilt. I tell people that at every wedding, because we tell them, look, we for thousands of years remember Jerusalem at our happiest days. We said, we will not forget you, Jerusalem, at our happiest days, right? Even on our happiest days, even when we're overcome with joy, we're not going to forget that. Now that's tough, because you're basically saying we're going to remember destruction. But we also, now I always tell people, thank God it's being rebuilt. And we live in a time when our ancestors could only dream of Jerusalem being rebuilt. And the fact that when we are saying this at a wedding today, it's not a matter of saying how horrible it is that we have to think about our destruction. Now we turned it, I think we turned it into a, let's not forget that it's being rebuilt. And we got a lot of work to do. I always tell people the work is not done. And I always also say that there's still suffering in the world. Unfortunately, some of that suffering comes out of the situation in Jerusalem. I'm not oblivious to that. I don't tell people it's not part of the reality. But I also tell people that thank God we live in a time when it's being rebuilt, and it's being rebuilt by us. It is it's a very powerful line. It's something that I never, like, I don't know how you can't, when you're at a wedding, you know, again, think about the fact that we do that. And I mean, the fact that we almost take it for granted now that our young people actually get to visit Jerusalem. Anyways, I'll tell you, Joey went back. He went on our birthright trip in 2016, and he went back a year later to volunteer. I mean, just volunteer. He ended up working as a teacher for about 9 months in Ashkelon, teaching English, because he loved the experience of being in Israel so much. So it's an amazing thing that you get to you get to live at a time, we get to, when this is actually not just what Jeremiah said, which is that you're not going to hear that, but then at a wedding saying it, and then when we break the glass to say now it's not all bad. So it's a strange thing how that's now come back and again, how do we understand these words, and how do we preserve those words, and how do we preserve that message? So it's very powerful. Judith just asked a question. What about at a wedding? What about if it's two brides? Is it a kala and a kala? Or conversely, the other side is a chatan and a chatan. Yeah, I haven't had that. We haven't had that. I've had it a couple times, but I guess, yeah, we did kala and kala. I have not had a chatan and a chatan, but had a kala and a kala. Yes, I mean, most rabbis who've done that, I'm sure, have if they're going to do it, they're going to change the words to kala and kala. So that's another thing that I'm sure Jeremiah couldn't have imagined. Anyways, thank you so much, Rosemary, for
Thank you.
reading and ending on what would have been a sad note, but I want you to know that 734 of Jeremiah was not. Yeah, yeah, it's not had a sad ending. At least we're not thinking about it in sadness today. So everybody have a great day, we will be in person and online next week. So
I will not be available. I'm going to be in Canada. So
have a very safe trip. For all those that are traveling, the Stolmans are traveling today. Judith is traveling today. No, Judith is back from her travels, at least for a little while. But in
August.
Be safe and careful as you're traveling, everybody, and enjoy your travels. Thank you again, everybody, and we'll be online tomorrow for Torah for our book of Numbers, as we're reading the story of Balaam and Balak, as I titled it. We're off to see the wizard.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Take care, everybody. Safe travels. Bye, everybody.
bye, everybody.
Bye.